Welcome, everybody. This study session, September 13th, is called to order. Donna, can you do a roll call, please?
I will. Councilmember Bode,
Here.
Councilmember Sherman. Here. Councilmember Gutierrez,
Here.
Mayor Nesco,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt,
Here.
Councilmember McDowell,
Present.
and Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Our first study item this evening is to review the permitting process. Parks and Facility Director Mark Ziegler will begin this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members. I'll start out by introducing our development review team here. Mike White, our senior engineer, in our engineering department, Public Works. Jason Dose, our senior planner. Keith Reeks, our fire marshal, and Sean Carlstrom, our building official. This is the breadth of our development review team. You're seeing all here tonight in one place. So it's really important. I felt that everybody's here tonight, able to give you their perspective on how the permit processing works on our side of things. Sometimes it's, behind closed doors, we're not sure how this process works. Sometimes people don't want to see how the sausage is made, right? They just want to see the end product. But we'll tell you a little bit about how the sausage is made, not get too deep into that, but feel free to ask any questions that you have to further clarify these processes. The one person that's not here tonight is Jill Dickinson. She's out this evening, our permit coordinator, who really is kind of the band director, if you will, the maestro. Sometimes more of a traffic cop, I think, in the permitting process. And so she's the really integral part that keeps things moving, is the front facing person at the counter when we take in permits over the counter. And then as we communicate permit statuses and updates and resubmittal processes and things like that. She's really the face of this team as they work behind the scenes. I will say, Sean and Jason and Keith and Jill, as I transition out of the community development role, I really appreciate the time that I've had to spend with them and their hard work and everything they've done for the city and for me as a director. So it's really exciting that they get to work with somebody with as much experience as Jay and Hill has. So we'll start with, we average, it's hard to say how many permits we average every year, but we do the mid 400s every year. So these folks are looking at over 400 permits annually, whether it's a single family residence, a right-of-way permit, or utility application, anything like that. They have a pretty high workload, as well as just answering questions, front counter work, answer the phone, pre-submission conferences that aren't included in those. So these folks, these professionals are really busy on a daily basis. I'll start by, oh, geez, I probably pushed it too quick. Yep, I did. So I'll start just with a little bit of introduction and speak about the permit coordinator duties, and then each one of these individuals get to talk about their role within development review for single family residences and commercial structures. First and foremost, why do we have permits, right? Some people can think it's onerous, it's unnecessary, but it really comes down to safety, right? It's the safety of you in your residence, in your house, safety for people visiting a commercial structure, whether it's a hotel, a restaurant, a mercantile, anything like that. We have the code is there for your safety and the people that occupying those buildings safety. Now we can go a step further and say utilities, right? Backflow prevention for water, sanitation, those are safety issues too that are addressed all within various codes that we're responsible to administer. Accessibility is a big one too. We want to make sure that particularly in the case of commercial structure, providing barrier-free access for individuals that have mobility issues. Compatibility, we want to make sure that industrial uses don't go into residential zones, right? So that's part of the land use and the zoning issues that these professionals look at every day. Environment, so we preservation of habitat, wetlands, our streams, making sure stormwater is clean when it gets discharged into our waterways, making sure our wetlands and shorelines are preserved. critical slopes as well. So we have critical slopes in this community in our city limits that they're highly erosive, are in danger of slides. So we need to maintain those and make sure those are safely maintained for the public. There's regulations that are passed down from other organizations like the federal government and FEMA and flood regulations that you've seen adopted throughout your time here. We have state regulations through the Building Code Council with ICC, International Code Councils, building codes, fire codes, ecology standards for some of those environmental protection issues that we were talking about before, and Fish and Wildlife plays a role in that as well. So some of these mandates are handed down that we have talked about, that we are adopting in order to meet those standards. Then we have locally adopted codes. Most of our codes don't frankly deviate from a lot of these state and federal standards. But other than in the building and planning arena, in the zoning code, you'll see more of that, as it pertains specifically to Shelton, because that's unique, and especially how land use occurs. And then you'll see more of that within the public works arena too, with street standards and utility standards. So the process starts with permit coordinator. As I mentioned, Jill Dickinson is our permit coordinator, and our process has changed recently, right? With the implementation of EnerGov and our electronic platform. We're still able to take hard copies across the counter, and we're still doing that. And so it's kind of a mix on how this permit processing works. But in general, the permit coordinator is the first line of contact, right? If somebody comes in over the counter, permit coordinator can meet them at the counter, answer any questions necessary at that time. If they're ready to submit that permit, there's a checklist to go through. That checklist is provided with our application, and that tells the applicant exactly what we need from them, whether it's a site plan that shows the location of their house on their parcel, their property lines, and any other, anything else needed at that point. Make sure the plans are included with the permit application, right? They're not written on a napkin, right? We have plans that we can read, that a contractor can pick up. Any contractor, if they're not associated with that project, can typically pick up and build that project. That's the level of plans that are desired and needed for us to do our proper review. So they're complete plans from foundation through your walls, roof structure. Sean's going to talk a lot about that here when we come up. So that counter completeness review is being done at that point. Once that review is done, it's complete. We have all the necessary documents within that plan set. Now, permit coordinator is not checking for code compatibility. They're just checking for completeness. Is the application complete? Do we have all the elements for that structure, for that building included in that plan set in order to route it to these professionals you see in front of you? Once that's routed out, then each one of these professionals take that plan set, put it in the hopper, right? They might have 10, 20, 30, 40 reviews they're doing at that time. The way we operate is we put that plan set next in line. So it's chronologically ordered. So if I submit in June, mine will be before that permit that comes in August for review. Again, once that routing is done, typically there's invoicing that's prepared. Now with EnerGov, the invoices are done up front. In fact, the customer can do an estimate online of what their permit fees will be. And then the permit coordinator will quite often have a correspondence with the applicant, whether it's through EnerGov or outside of EnerGov. If there's a resubmittal required, if there's something lacking within that application, if there's some clarification within the permit, if they just missed a line somewhere and we need some more information, there'll be some back and forth and clarification at that point. They'll develop conditions, package those conditions from each of the reviewers within the city. So you get a stack of paper, essentially the old school when it wasn't EnerGov. Now it's a stack that you digitally sign, but you had a stack of paper and you initialed that or signed off on the conditions that are required for your permit. And those conditions can change based on the type of construction. Sean can talk about that. And well, everybody has conditions with their permit, depending on the type. The permit is issued. permit coordinator will issue the permit at a time, once all the approvals have taken place. And then works through scheduling inspections, so either online, again, through Energov, or if we have some permits that are done manually, call in, schedule inspections, make sure staff get out and perform those inspections throughout the construction process. And then it's at the end, obviously, certificate of occupancy. That's kind of an all clear, ready to go. And then the permit coordinator also is our records management person. So they're compiling these records, they're managing these, they're performing the review when we have a public records request come in. Quite often, especially in commercial properties, we'll get when there's a sale or information, additional information warranted for some of these larger projects, larger commercial projects, when they're in financing or sales, something like that. We get big public records requests that ask for any permit violations, code violations, maybe even building plans from historical building plans or any information like that before they move forward with some of these processes. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the permit coordinator. And Keith is going to take over from here and talk about the fire side of things.
So once I receive the permit application and a set of plans, no matter what, if it's a single family residence, commercial, or a change of use, I'm kind of looking at all the same things for all of them. First off, do they have fire department access? Can we get our vehicles to the building? Do they have fire flow? Do we need additional hydrants? Or anything of that sort? Do they have a Knox box so we can make access to the building without damaging doors? And then once, for mostly commercial, I'll say for residential, I get sent those if there's something weird about it. But for commercial, I'll look at the egress. Fire department access again, water supply. Is a fire suppression system needed? Is a fire alarm system needed? Is there emergency lighting? So if the power goes out, people can still exit the building. All those different things that have been built on in the fire code. Basically from loss of life. Everything in the fire code was caused because there was some sort of major property loss or loss of life. Now, a lot of our sprinkler requirements and our occupant loads came from the Station nightclub fire. Fire resistant wall coverings came from the MGM Grand fire where people lost lives, and so on and so forth. So those are the things I'm looking for in that. And once I'm going through, there's kind of two separate permits that may be required as I'm doing that plan review. A construction permit, which would be their alarm system, suppression, private hydrant, or emergency radio extender. The emergency radio extender is our radios and law enforcement's radios will work within the building, because a lot of times with these metal buildings, we go inside, our radios stop working. So we can't talk to our command unit outside or anything. So now those are required in commercial buildings to make sure we can still talk. Operational permits are those type of special things that have a little bit more requirements on them. So the fire code requires they have a separate permit. Temporary membrane structure, fireworks displays, hazardous materials, hot works, high piled storage, and hazardous materials. Oh, I'm sorry, I have that twice. Are kind of the big ones. And that's because they have specific requirements for them. And then it's also a good way for us to track how much were they allowed to have of a hazardous materials. So we know if they're starting to go over what the building was designed for. So we can keep track that it's in there. So my crews know what's in that building when they're going in. Temporary membrane structures, because doing a whole building permit would be kind of a pain if you just want to put up a tent. So there's an operational permit that's a little easier to go through. So those are kind of the big things I'm looking for on any of the permits.
All right. And then when the building department is doing the residential construction plan review and inspections. We're checking the setbacks from the property lines, the elevations. That'll show us the siding treatments to make sure that they meet the zoning requirements. Roof pitch, height of building, grade. We're looking at fire and life safety elements such as smoke detectors, CO. The building code requires a heat detector now in all of the attached garages. And then also the fire separation, whether that's a duplex townhouse or just between different occupancies like your garage and your house. And then we also, on the residential, we do look at the egress. All houses require at least one egress door. All the bedroom windows need to meet the minimum requirements. You gotta have at least 20 inches wide, 24 inches high. You need 6.7 square feet net opening, so people can get in and get out. There's let's see, footings and foundations. We're checking the size, the depth, the reinforcement. It's really important that the construction documents are accurate, that are approved, and we try to get those nailed up front so that the contractor knows how to install and what they're expected to install. And then we can verify that in the field. And then there's the floor plan. That typically just shows how the rooms and spaces communicate. Floor construction, wall construction, wall bracing. We have prescriptive ways of achieving the wall bracing. Otherwise, there's engineering that could be used in lieu of the prescriptive path. Roof and ceiling construction. We're looking at all the loads really coming from the roof all the way down through the walls to the ground, really. All those loads need to be transferred down. Roof assemblies. They should have flashing details in there. The roofing material, the pitch, the vapor barrier, energy efficiency. We've got the Washington State Energy Code residential provisions. There's a new carbon emission table where you get extra credits if you use like a ductless heat pump, different heat pumps. R values on the insulation, U values on any of the glazing, the energy seal, and plumbing and mechanical fixtures. We're looking to make sure those are also on the plans and they're in the right places, and the fuel sources, and then the electrical. Mostly on the electrical, we're doing our review on the solar, but L&I Electrical Division, they do all the permitting for the electrical. So when we go out in the field to do our inspections, we make sure that before we do the combo inspection, which is usually the framing, plumbing, mechanical, and maybe gas lines, the first thing we do is we check and make sure that that L&I has okayed it for cover. And then before we perform our final inspection, we make sure that L&I has also been out again and did a final inspection. And then the commercial construction documents. Basically, everything I've mentioned for residential plus the occupancy classification. There's about 25 separate occupancies. So assembly, you've got A1 through A5. A1 is viewing movies, TV, performances. An A2 occupancy is your typical restaurant or bar. And A3 would include churches and like even the YMCA recreation facilities. Now, there's been some question also on in the past, and we were just talking about this, but there's a change of use, and then there's also a change in the character of use. So you could have two different, you could say you have an A2 occupancy, it's a bar, and they want to become a restaurant. They're both an A2 occupancy, but it's a change in the character of the occupancy, which is in fact a change of use. And there's different requirements for those different occupancies. And then, of course, there's the business occupancies, the education, factory, high hazard facilities, institutional facilities, mercantiles, your typical shopping centers or grocery stores. We've got 3 different residential occupancies. The state of Washington didn't adopt the R4 occupancy. The R3 is your typical single family residence, townhouse or duplex. All of those are regulated out of the residential code. But the commercial code regulates the R1 and the R2. The R1 is the where the sleeping units are transient in nature, like motels or hotels. The R2 could be the sleeping units that are permanent in nature, like a extended stay apartments. And then, of course, we've got the storage occupancies. And then the utility occupancies, like those are accessory to your residential structures, barns, garages, sheds. We're looking at the occupant loads. And that's really determined by really the occupancy itself and the square footage and how the space is used and how it communicates with the other occupancies. Typically, you have mixed occupancies quite often in a commercial building. We regulate the accessibility code to make sure that people can get in and out of the building safely. Communication features, like Keith mentioned, just work areas that are accessible. And we also get that out of the ANSI standard, the A117. And the residential code, getting back to the residential code, you'll find the mechanical, the plumbing, the electrical, that's all within the IRC, the residential code. But when you're looking at a commercial space, you've got the International Mechanical Code. It's a whole nother book. It's mainly dealing with your HVAC. You got the Fuel and Gas Code. You've got the Fire Code, the NFPA 13, and that's for the automatic sprinkler systems and the requirements on the installation on that. All of the adopted codes have reference standards that we also go through and regulate, make sure they're meeting all the minimum code requirements. And then also the ASCE 716. That's where all of the engineering calculations all come from, is the ASCE 716. And let's see. And then as far as the change of use, or commercial space remodel or renovation, we basically look at that as a commercial construction project. We review it the same. Plus the provisions that are provided by the international existing building code. Oh, and then on a project on whether it's residential or commercial, fire, maybe like on a commercial project, fire needs to perform their final and approve. You might have the Mason County Health Department, of course, the planning department, public works. The building department is the last department. Once everybody else has approved the project, that's when we come out and do the final inspection. And because it's the building department that issues the certificate of occupancy.
Sean, how many typical inspections in residential compared to a commercial project? I know you have to
Oh,
generalize a little bit.
Yeah, there's usually about 10 on a residential project, but we've had a lot of big projects since I've been here. We've had all the school projects and the 60,000 square foot addition to the hospital. Those happen a lot different. They're in phases. So you go in there quite a bit, but you might only be looking at a couple of rooms, just, helping the contractors keep their guys busy. They might have drywallers over here, guys putting insulation in over here, electricians, and they're all on top of each other. So that gets a little more complicated than a typical residential project. So.
And that's certainly a service we like to provide, right? We like to keep these projects moving. They're investing in our community as best we can. If we have our one building official on vacation for a week, we have to plan ahead, right? So Sean does quite a few inspections remotely now. So we'll do pictures or videos or something like that, or we schedule in advance. We'll let contractors know, going to be out to a conference or out on vacation, every once in a while he gets to go on vacation. And it's like, if we can get some inspections out of the way before he heads out of town, we like to communicate that as much as we can. So these projects keep moving, these contractors can keep rolling, and it doesn't affect their timeline. So it's really fluid, I guess, and it's fluid, throughout this process. You hear us talk about, all the uses and everything else that goes into some of these projects, but no one project's unique, right? The single family residence might be the only project that you can kind of say is pretty typical. After you deviate from that, every project's really unique and might have a different set of plans, engineering, inspections required with it. So it's hard to break it down and give you that, that cookie cutter, here's the process for each and every time. But we'll do our best here to provide that info for you. Is that it for you, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Mike's up, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you tonight. My name is Mike White again. Work in the Public Works and Engineering Department. We handle basically 3 permitting processes through Energo, which really is part of what we do. We're also involved in the Western Gateway overlay project to evaluate, make sure we have water for the city. So we do a lot of fun engineering stuff as well. To kind of dovetail on Sean, and I also want to just mention how we're a collaborative team, and I feel really privileged to work with basically Keith and Sean, Jason, and Mark. They're all very seasoned. They really know what they're doing. They have great experience, so they are just great team members. when we do, when there's a residential or commercial permit, whether it's reconstruction, new construction, we handle basically three components: erosion and sediment control, site grading to make sure we're not going to flood the neighbors, and then the drainage design, which of course, the city of Shelton adopted the 2019 Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington, which is a real exciting 1,108 page read. If you ever need something to read it. Our Public Works Director, Jay Harris, who's here today, and Brent Armstrong, who oversees sewer and storm, they recently put together and published a small project stormwater guide. Essentially, they took that 1,108 pages and boiled it down to just a small, I forget how many pages, like 30 pages, I forget the exact number, but for like single family homes. So because we work with a lot of homeowners that come in and, you know, they may not be familiar with the regs. We work with them and help them figure out how to do all this stuff that they're required to do. You know, our objective is we want to help people. We want customers to come in. We want people to build. We try to make it as easy as we can. However, you know, these regulations, you know, they're not that easy to follow. And the city of Shelton falls under what's called a phase 2 NPDES permit, which is a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit. That's a federal mandate. We're required by law to comply with this NPDES phase 2. If we do not, I came from larger municipalities where they were lax on keeping up with those. And the ECY, Department of Ecology, you know, they could come in if we're not in compliance. You know, we could be fined. So it's really imperative that we work with our applicants, but you know, we have to follow these regulations because they're mandated, you know, federally. And that's about it. It's, you know, it's not complicated. It's fairly straightforward. Again, we try to help our applicants. We do have some larger projects that we're involved in. One project we're getting ready to bust loose, Coffee Creek's 271 lots. First phase is 71 lots. So we're figuring out, you know, all the stuff, the grading, the stormwater, sewer, water, all those things, which is, you know, we get in, it's obviously that's not a small project. So we get into more complicated reviews. We also handle utility applications, which is a separate submittal for new sewer, new water. You might have an existing home that used to have a water meter and sewer where we are now activating that sewer or water. Utility applications also take into account stormwater, where we evaluate GFC fees, which are tied to sewer, water, storm, and transportation impact fees, I guess, in a sense, are GFC fees. The GFC meaning general facility charge. The purpose of these fees is to help us cover the cost to operate, you know, our wastewater plant, to treat the water, to deliver the water, you know, all those things. But again, an example of, we had an applicant come in this past week. He was interested in basically buying a home that had been, I think it burned down, I don't know, 10 years ago. What was that, 227 9? Do you remember when that burned down 10, 11 years ago? Anyway, so again, Public Works, we work as a team. So what essentially what I do is I have, you know, 2 great team members, which we're very fortunate to hire. Amy Anderson, who's a senior inspector. We hired her from Miles Resources, which is actually building. She's a great engineer. She knows how to construction stake. She knows how to shoot grades. So we actually go out and help some of the engineers figure things out. Both Jay Harris and I, we have a development background. We've done a lot of land development. So, you know, we want to work with people to help them be successful in what they do. So for example, utility on that one lot, we call up the sewer department. I get with Amy, she gets with the sewer. A couple guys are experts in the sewer department, the water department, stormwater. They go out, we physically locate on the lot where if there is an existing sewer service, water service. Again, we're trying to make it easy for folks. We let them know, what their costs would be. We work with them. And again, I just happen to be the guy talking to you, there's a group of us, we all collaboratively work together. So utility applications are pretty straightforward. The fees are set, per the fee schedule, which is on our webpage adopted by city council. And then we have our TIF fees, which help fund transportation impact fees, which help to fund, redoing our roads, fixing intersections, things of that nature. And then we also have our right-of-way permit, which under our municipal code, we have 4 classes of right-of-way permits. We primarily handle class 2 temporary construction permits, which involves boring, culverts, curb cuts, paving, drainage, driveways. Basically, you want to do anything in the right of way. Say you're building a house and you need to get tap into the sewer main, you got to have a right of way permit. We have insurance requirements. The insurance requirements are set by the Washington City Insurance Authorities. We follow that guideline. They are a bit stringent, but again, we're trying to minimize risk to the city. Therefore, we follow the guidelines that they set forth. Right-of-way permits might include tying into city sewer and water for a single-family home, might be a new driveway, putting in a new driveway, or for Coffee Creek, a 271 lot subdivision. Anything in the right-of-way, which basically becomes our asset. When the roads are built, we want to make sure those roads are going to last 20, 30 years because we don't have the funding to rebuild those roads 10 years down the road. So we have, when they do the roads, they have all these testing requirements. When they pour the concrete, they submit a mix design, we review it, we approve it. When they pour the concrete, they take concrete core samples. Those are sent, they have 3-day break, 7-day break, 28-day break. So we want to make sure that these assets that, after a year, we take ownership of them, that we're not going to have, a $5 million sewer project because we didn't do our job to make sure these things were installed correctly. Max, can you pop that up? I followed the lead of our city engineer. He said a picture is worth 1,000 words. So bear with me for a minute. If you can't get it, I have hard copies. Okay. You guys can share. This is an example of a right-of-way permit gone awry.
License look familiar.
Okay, so you can see this was a right-of-way permit that was issued for a single-family home. We had a contractor who came out of Portland, Oregon, and they're licensed in Washington to do work. They were basically trying to tie into a sewer main. And the depth of the excavation exceeded 4 feet. And once you exceed a depth of 4 feet, OSHA standards require that you have to have shoring. You have to have a method for workers to get in and out of, that excavated area for safety. And this is actually, you can see right here, this is an alley along here. There's a gas main that's right basically in this area. They had undermined the alleyway. The gas main was almost exposed. I actually did I used to do a lot of underground utility work in my younger days, was actually involved in a project where we're putting in water main that's in Virginia Beach. And we had a gas main guy there every day. He showed up. Guess what? One day he didn't show up. We broke the gas main. And literally, it was a large gas main. We shut down, I don't even know how many blocks we evacuated. So, we wanted to make, so and the guy just left. He just left. So what I did is took a picture, we cited all the areas where the contractor was deficient. I contacted our water supervisor, Mike Albaugh, and Mike Albaugh and his people came. We went ahead and secured this area on our own because the guy just left. He went back to Oregon. We went ahead and fixed that, made the road safe. We put up adequate protection. And we advised the applicant who hired this contractor. And, again, this is an example why we have standards is for the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. We want to make sure that when contractors come in, they do it safe, they do it right. So that at the end of the day, we're not going to have problems with infiltration into our sanitary sewer system or water leaking out of a water main connection or our roads collapsing because, somebody didn't compact properly. So, that's why we have all these standards, which are set forth in our municipal code, design and construction standards, and we also rely upon WSDOT standards as well. That's about it for me. You guys want to hang on to those, or I can
Yes.
take those back?
Yes.
That's fine now.
All right. Well, this might be one of the few times I've sat in front of this body for this long without saying a word. I was starting to get antsy. So I get my turn.
Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take liberty all the time I need. So at this point, if people are applying for a building permit, be it commercial or residential, it's assumed they've already gone through any land use process that might be required. So I'm not going to talk about subdivisions, short plats, site plan review, conditional use permit, these sorts of things. At this point, somebody's at the counter applying for a building permit. What I'm doing from a community development standpoint for a residential review, the most important aspects of that application for me are the site plan, floor plan, and elevation drawings. Basically, that's the pretty pictures. Essentially, you're looking at the exterior of the home and you're looking at the site plan. Where do they want to place all of the improvements on the lot? Where's the driveway going to be? Where's the home going to be? Where are all the hard surfaces, sidewalks, exterior shed, patio cover, these sorts of things. What I'm looking for is compliance with zoning for a residential structure. Typically, that's in our neighborhood residential zone. So I'm just looking at setbacks, height, parking, that you have the requisite 2 parking spaces on site for a single family residence, and compliance with our newly adopted design standards. So it kind of gets to Sean's point, what our permit tech and what the building department is looking for when they intake a permit is that they're complete. So in my view, it's he's looking for engineering, nailing details, hold downs. I flip through all that stuff. All I'm looking for is that you have a detailed site plan, fully dimensioned, and it's accurate. That's the key. As a sidebar, we have had some permits applied for. We approve a site plan. The building inspector, he's the one who verifies things like setbacks. So I'll approve it from a land use standpoint. Yes, this site plan complies with the minimum setbacks, lot coverage, all these things. The building inspector on a few occasions comes out onto a job site, looking at the site plan, looking at what they're constructing, and they don't match. So he'll call me out. Hey, Jason, I've got an issue at this site. We try to work it out. What's going on here? Either in some cases, the developer might have to actually move the structure. They have a dig out for a foundation and they mistakenly thought their property line was in one location when in fact it's in another. We have had certain situations where they have to move the foundation. In other situations, it's as simple as amending the site plan, because we want our drawings to be accurate at the end of the day. When a project's final, if you're showing a structure with a 10-foot setback from the front, when in fact it's a 25-foot setback when you built it, we'd like everything to be as constructed on the ground. From for any residential or commercial structure, there can be kind of sidebar codes that might apply if you're in the shoreline jurisdiction, anywhere within 200 feet of a regulated waterway, if it's a lake, creek, stream, what have you. You might have to go through shoreline permitting, and I would verify that it's either been done or you're complying with the conditions of that review. Same goes for flood zone. If you're in the flood zone, there are some requirements that apply even to a single family residence. So we kind of partner that with the building department and review for flood safe construction. For a commercial project, it's about the same thing, but it can be a little more detailed in the sense that, like, if you're building a new Fred Meyer, let's say, it will have gone through the land use process, site plan review, SEPA review, and there may be some conditions associated with that for landscaping, for parking, for exterior lighting, for exterior materials. So I'll be looking at not the zoning in that case. What I do when that application comes in is I pull out that land use review as it's either approved at the staff level or by the hearings examiner, and I'm verifying, do they comply with these conditions? Yes, no. At the end of the day, when everything's under construction, as Sean said, before he'll approve a final inspection on the building standpoint for a commercial project, he's going to ask my office to come out, look at things like landscaping, exterior materials, exterior lighting. Does it comply with all these requirements? If the answer is yes, then he moves forward on his end. And it's the same for all these departments. You know, Mike's going to go out and review sewer connections, infiltration galleries. Keith's going to look at whatever you look at. I know he did. And for change of use, business licenses, typically my job's pretty simple. I mean, mine's mostly a sign off, assuming all of these basically assume folks have typically talked to my office first, you know, before they do a commercial project. I mean, of course, they've gone through land use review. Typically, every once in a while, somebody comes in with a new commercial project, haven't gone through land use. But for residential, you know, we have builders in this room. They're talking to me first about a property, and hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'll give them the zoning, and you know, they follow it. Essentially, we're verifying all these things before occupancy is granted. And I mean, I don't know. That's really about it. It's for my end, it's a little simpler, I think. Wasn't expected to give a land use presentation today. That would be a lot longer if we went through each permit and what we're looking at, which I'm happy to do. Just give me the word.
As you can hear, just the broad overall view tonight, development's complicated. But the overall goal of all of these folks is community safety, preservation of our assets, because as Mike mentioned, we take them over after a year and then we have to maintain them, and that means using public dollars to maintain them. So we want to make sure what we're getting meets our standards and is quality to begin with. And I think a lot of the confusion that has followed the permit process and some of the things that people have talked about stems from a place of these folks trying to help. Because for quite a long time, they were taking in applications that weren't complete because they wanted to help people achieve what they were trying to achieve. And that only causes confusion down the road. So what we've started doing, and we'll help the customer file a complete application for sure, but we're not going to accept a permit that isn't complete. Because when we start our review, we need to be able to process that quickly in a timely fashion for the people that expect to start the building project. Trying to help up front when we don't have a complete application just causes angst and concern down the road. So help people put together complete applications. We'll review those and get those out the door as soon as possible. I think a big help is EnerGov, because our partners with Central Mason have got their EnerGov login. They can do everything right online directly from their office. So it should increase efficiency quite a bit. But as you know, as mentioned several times tonight, all these folks are looking to help and help people do what they want to do. Is how do I want to phrase this? Come talk to us first before you do something, and we will give you all the information that we have in order to help you achieve what you want to do. So.
Could I add one thing to that? I like that statement. I mean,
You
I
wanna
get a
add
reputation sometimes for being the no guy, right? Because people come talk to the planner and it's like, no, the code doesn't allow you to build a nuclear power plant in a residential zone. I'm sorry. But honestly, I'm a yes man. The 100%, the easiest thing for me to say is yes. And I think everybody at this panel would agree. We all want to say yes, because that's easy. We're all happy in that case. But we also have a job to do. In my case, I am implementing the rules and regulations adopted by this council, right? That's my job. If I'm not doing it, what am I sitting here for? Same with everybody at the table. But honestly, we do want to get to yes. That is the goal. Absolutely. Might not feel that way sometimes, but that is honestly the goal.
And we're going to run, you will hear a presentation sometime in the future about land use process, which usually precedes all of the building stuff. But I know the building permits are a big topic of discussion. So having this out there and being able to answer questions, if you have any tonight, or if any come up in the future, we'll be happy to answer those for you. But land use process, we're going to go through finance and risk management and everything else. I want this to be a series so that everybody understands what the city does and why we do it, because sometimes it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense if you don't know all the background and the requirements that we have to follow, either from federal or state regulations or codes adopted by council. So.
Actually, Mark answered my question that I had for you guys about video inspections and picture inspections. How long we've been doing that and how's that working out and at what level can we do that at? I know like sheetrock or installation, you could just take a picture, send it to you and you can kind of like approve that and then put sheetrock up and.
Yeah, it really is. I'd like to do it when it's like a big one, like a combo inspection. There's just so many things that we're looking at, but yeah, if it's a sheetrock fastener inspection, there's a few. Where it works best though is where you've already gone out and done the inspection and they have a correction notice, and then they can photo document or video or Zoom inspection and go over those items that needed correction.
It's targeted areas of the structure, right? It's
It is.
General structure, yeah.
Yeah, you'll find when you do a big inspection, the contractors move the camera pretty quick. And you can tell what areas they don't want you to see.
We have some greater capability now with Intergov to perform
Yeah.
inspections remotely with an iPad. You actually, can make comments, approve, have conditions fail the inspection in some cases, and it's loaded into the CCS, the public portal. So you as an applicant, you as a permit holder can review that online as well. Immediately, we can add pictures to it. So we have greater capability of performing some of those functions and being able to communicate that rather than, I don't know if you all know, the correction notice it's handed over in the field, and that's much more cumbersome.
I was just thinking of the easier things that take more time. Like I think I did a repair where I needed the insulation inspected on a Friday. And then I had to wait till next Friday to have the screws inspected on the sheetrock. And I was just wondering if that now something that's a little faster, maybe it can be done just like.
Yeah. Oh, we accommodate contractors all the time. The biggest, well, at least for me, I always try to make sure that they can move forward with their project. So if I can say, do a insulation inspection, I can document those areas and show them, share that with the contractor and let them know I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to move forward. But I'll be checking these on the next inspection along with the next inspection. And I haven't had a contractor yet that doesn't do that. They like to share that trust and they don't want to lose that, but at the same time, it keeps their project moving. They're not waiting for an inspection. And like Mark said, if I'm gonna be gone, I make a good effort to make sure all the contractors, everybody that's building, they know I'm gonna be out of town. They might change their schedule a little bit, so I can see some of the things before I leave, and then I'll be checking my email. And do some of the inspections that way, but. It's always been really important to me to keep the project moving. Whenever possible.
Thank you.
Got a bunch of high level questions. I'll start with the first one, it's sort of two-part. During the review and the inspection process, what are the most common mistakes, violations that you guys see?
Well,
Let's circle back.
yeah, no, I mean. It has been, it can be a struggle sometimes with the change of use. It would be very simple if we were requiring that the plans be prepared by a registered design professional. Because people don't want to spend that money, and they have a business or a renovation they want to do on a commercial space. But it's really necessary.
Seems like sheer,
But-
from what I talked to you, sheer walls and things like that are the most misunderstood, maybe.
Oh, definitely
Right.
on the residential side.
Residential side.
Yeah.
I think Sean's conditioning, sheer walls, quite a bit, or having a resubmittal based on that, probably more than anything
Mhm.
else.
There's more contractors now, though, that are they're getting the engineer and because they want to get their permit quick. And they see that that's what's slowing down the permit process, but and we still meet them if at all possible. They can structurally design their project prescriptively. Yeah, I'll sit down with them and help them get there to where they can get their project started.
Nobody else?
My
Like
biggest thing is,
sediment control,
Sediment control?
ENS. It's kind of like a mystery to most people. They're like, what are we gonna do? Well, first of all, coming from the private sector, erosion and sediment control is money out of the contractor's pocket. There's no payback for that from their perspective. So, but we work with people, they come in and we actually just hired Kenny Ober, who grew up in Shelton. He's like, the kid is friggin' phenomenal, really smart. And he knows everything about Shelton. Oh, yeah, they used to motorbike here. Oh, I did. So he knows how things drain and so for whatever reason, people are like, what do I gotta do that? In the regs. You wanna read this or you wanna just do that and I'll get your permit approved? So that and I don't think people really like to read. It's kind of a lost art. But our design and construction standards, it's a lot of pages and there's a lot of things in there that are required, density tests of road and there's different ways if you're gonna tie in, do a sewer connection to a main. The details are fairly straightforward, but for whatever reason, it becomes complicated when, that's what I tell people. They pay me all this money because I'm really good at reading. And that is really what it boils down to is just helping people say, oh, well, this is what it says here. So I think a lot of it just has to do with navigating our municipal code, our design and construction standards, a lot of pages. We read it every day, so we know it quite well. Some builders, they're repeat customers, so but we have now investors from other, parts of really, I think we met somebody who's from the East Coast is looking to buy, basically, for example, I think a washed person, we actually rode around with a couple washed out people, looked at some safety things. One of the person was getting ready to retire. He sold his home in Thurston County, bought one in Shelton. He said my property taxes are 1/3 what they were. So a lot of people are now, plus with being able to work remotely. I think there's a lot of investors that are coming from other parts of California, other states. And so for them, they're not familiar with our standards, so we help them, navigate that. And again, our city manager and public works director, they've directed us that, we're trying to help people be successful. And so I spend a lot of time just copying and pasting sections out of the standards and say, hey, here you go, read this part, I'll highlight, underline. And that's a lot of what I do on a regular basis. And I'm sure Jason and Keith and Sean and Martin as well.
For my purposes, for a building permit, it's pretty simple. Mostly with residential. When you get to the commercial standpoint, you have them being drawn by an architect and they're generally showing all the information I need. But for a residential standpoint, the most common thing I ask for is more detail on the site plan, right? So I'll get a site plan. A lot of times they'll be originally drawn to scale, but then when they copy them, they don't copy them at the same size they drew them. So the scale means nothing to me. I'll start scaling stuff out the drawing, and let's say the plat says it's a 70-foot wide lot, but it scales at 42 feet or something because of the way they copied it. So the applicant loses some time in that sense. So what I always suggest to people is scale it, but also write in the key dimensions, write in your setbacks. This distance is 18 feet, this is 16. It just makes life so much simpler. So that way, if the scale isn't working on the set I've got, I can still do my job.
I think understanding where property lines are too. We get a lot
Yeah.
of questions about property lines. There's not accurate surveys, you don't have a corner. The street might not have curb gutter sidewalk. It's a paved section of street that is 20 feet possibly from their property line. And a lot of people think their property line is the edge of asphalt, and that's where we'll get a site plan that indicates that. So we see that, on a regular basis.
We rely on the applicant to tell us where the property lines are, right? So we'll have the plat, so I can look at a site plan and say, yes, this site plan is drawn accurately for this lot. But when it comes time to verify that on the ground, we don't actually require a survey. You don't have to have your property corner staked. I mean, I personally wouldn't build without having my property corner staked, but a lot of people do. And I just want to make that clear. We're relying on the applicant to show us where the property lines are. There are certain situations where we can just tell outright, that's wrong. You're way off. I think 5 or 6 times since I've worked here, we've had to have builders literally move structures because it just is very obvious when you get out there. They're pulling their setback from like Mark said, the paved street, when in fact, most of our right of ways in town in residential areas are 60 feet wide. So that's the area where curb, gutter, sidewalk, parking lanes, and street would live if they all existed. But a lot of our roads, as we all know, are paved in the middle. People naively think it's mostly a lot of homeowners. Oh, that's my property line from the edge of street. When in fact, the right of way, that's again, the public area, might extend another 20, 25 feet from the edge of street. A lot of people don't realize that.
The other part too is don't assume it's paved right down the middle.
Yeah, correct.
Offset
It
a
is
bit.
not always paved down the middle.
That's that as designed versus as constructed.
Right.
Right. So for me, I'm sorry, for me, the cleanest example that I can show about what Keith mentioned earlier is a lot of these regulations are written whether the building or fire code because somebody got hurt or died. And the easiest thing that I can show people to illustrate that, any commercial building is going to open out and it's going to have those crash bars on it. That's really what all of this is that just repeated over and over again throughout commercial spaces. It's because people got hurt.
She has a question first. Go ahead. confusing on the property line. I was totally blown away when I found out that the property line for our house is almost to the front porch. So all that lawn and sidewalk belongs to the city.
I mean, it might, I'm not specifically, I know where you live, but I haven't looked at it that closely, but that's quite possible. Because it's a 60-foot right of way and your section of roadway down there is what, probably 20 feet wide, maybe? I'm guessing.
Yeah, so it was kind of hard to think that all that space in front that I think is ours is not ours.
Particularly older structures built prior to some of the more modern standards, or, you know, before a street was paved, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, there weren't as many regulations, there wasn't the need for the regulations we have now where some of these structures were placed.
Before everybody out that might be watching, may or may not be watching, goes out and just assumes, you know, the back of sidewalk is my property line now. I'll give you an example at my very own home. So I live in a newer subdivision platted in the late 90s, built in the early 2000s on the south end of town. We have curb gutter sidewalks, you know, the whole bit out in front. My property line doesn't start for about 12 feet behind the sidewalk.
Yeah.
I know this because I have my property corners staked. I still maintain all that. To the lay person, it looks like my yard. You know, I've got landscaping there, keep it mowed, but that front 12 feet is not mine. That's in the public right of way. So if I wanted to add on to my house, I certainly shouldn't be pulling from the back of sidewalk for my setbacks. I should be pulling from my actual front property line.
We got the right of way permits where, you know, I go out in the field to verify and, turns out it's not in the right of way. So said, don't need a permit from us. You're not in the right of way. So, and then I've had right of way permits where, because this was actually one project put together by a geotech, you know, a licensed professional engineer. And, you know, they had piping going out of the neighbor's lot. They didn't look at the, you know, basically the property lines. And so we have GIS and then we have Mason County. So we can kind of generally figure out where it is, but the piping was so encroached into the neighbor's yard and said, well, you need an easement, or, you know, you can't pipe your drainage through the neighbor's yard. So it's a big issue. We definitely want to check it and make sure, because if we issue a permit and then they put that pipe into the neighbor's, you know, through the neighbor's yard, we become liable for issuing that.
Thank you. Councilmember Sherman.
Yeah, I have a question. So let's say hypothetically, there's somebody in your neighborhood that has gotten away with some stuff without getting permits, because they're doing it on evenings and weekends, and they've moved through this process and they've gotten pretty far. And then finally, somebody nails them, they get the stop work order, they stop work. But let's say they've already closed those walls. What do you guys do at that point? I'm just curious.
Well, we've had them open the walls up.
Have you?
We have.
All right, thanks.
You can look at typical construction, right, on site, and you can kind of get a sense of the construction that's
Right.
occurring on site, and it'll give you a pretty good idea of how deep you need to dig into that work,
Yeah.
right? There's some intuition there and some knowledge and experience that all of these folks use to determine how deep you dig into that structure and that construction that occurred with that permit.
Great, Commissioner Peterson.
So a couple questions. So, you know, we talked early on about applicants or package conditions at the beginning of a process. And I know council has worked to support staff in having predictability as part of that process. So when or how might new conditions arise, and how do we handle that with an applicant or a contractor?
So talk about conditions, Sean. Sean's got a lot of canned conditions, right? in the
Yeah.
Building code. There might be new conditions that arise based on the type of construction.
Well, and the building codes are adopted about every 3 years, and the entire code doesn't change. But there are sections that do change, so we have to comb through that, and that's for the building department, though, that's really when we update. When those conditions change.
But typically what we're seeing then is hopefully, when an applicant comes in, once they've met with the entire team and they're given, this is what you need to do to move your project forward. We're hopefully not having major changes, big surprises down the road. What, are there any circumstances that might trigger some sort of, unusual? We said this, but now we need to go here, or is it a fairly straightforward process?
If they pre-sub and gone through the pre-submission conference, typically they've received that information up front prior to. If they haven't pre-subbed and we don't get an accurate application, it might change in their mind, but it isn't necessarily on the city's end because we haven't had a chance to review it or even consider the project beforehand. Once a project is submitted under an existing code cycle, it's vested other than stormwater, right? And anything else that really apply?
Just stormwater.
So it's vested. So it's right now we're under the 2018 International Building Code, Fire Code. So that's if you applied today, it took us 3 weeks or whatever, and there's a new code cycle coming in. It would be vested under the 18 code cycle.
The only time that would change is if you don't have substantial progress toward completing the permit. And the permit then expires. If you come back to apply, and the code has changed, it's not going to be the same conditions because you have new code regulations that you have to meet. You're no longer vested. I think a lot of that happens not as part of the building code, but as part of site plan review sometimes, particularly with the environmental pieces. Because those best management practices and the shoreline we just updated last year. If I remember right.
And we're about to update flood regulations.
Right. So those things change. But once you're vested, there shouldn't be any surprises unless there's something new to us. There are occasions when we miss things, and when we do, we'll own that. But that should not happen very often. One of the things I've talked to all these folks about is, make it predictable upfront. Yeah.
We actually recently issued a permit to install a low pressure force main for the MTA, the park and ride site. And in that particular site, I don't know if you notice where they pick up, there's like an open area. The reason there's an open area is there was contaminated soil, there was fuel tanks in the ground, there used to be a wastewater plant. So there's a lot of unknowns that are in there. So what we did is we put a lot of conditions and we essentially put the liability of basically working with the Department of Ecology, because I think that particular site is a voluntary cleanup. So we obviated these things, but it's not our responsibility to figure it all out. And so those were part of the engineering special conditions. So we advised them, but we're not going to go out there and dig up everything and figure it out for them. That's their responsibility.
Yeah, that's true too. Once you open the ground, you don't know what's in there until you open it up.
And I know most of this evening is focused on new builds or, significant projects, but for small projects, this may be a topic for another day. It seems like a lot of times, especially DIYers or small projects, people are like, do I need a permit? When do I need a permit? I didn't realize I needed one for that. So, do we have like a checklist or a flow chart, or how do people know? I mean, Jill does not need more phone calls, right? So from a community education outreach standpoint, looking at small projects and permits, it's a very different beast than what we've discussed here this evening, I know.
We've got a quick reference sheet on the website.
Yep.
That can be found, community development, that says, do I need a permit? Yeah. And it's a call, really, frankly, and it's a call. Everybody sitting up here has a fairly good idea because it's a small departments that work closely together. Mike has a good idea when a building permit's required. Jason has a good idea when a right-of-way permit's required, because we're sitting around the development review table with a lot of these projects. So it's not that it's just the permit coordinator and permit coordinators out for that period of time. We have people around that can generally steer the applicant or the citizen in the right direction.
And like Jason said earlier, we want to say yes. So if there's a question, call us. We'd much rather talk to you ahead of time than have to deal with construction that's already taken place and having to open up walls.
And then kind of from the 50,000 foot level, like how do we as a city evaluate our permitting process? Like what is an average timeline? When have we been successful in the process? I mean, how was the applicant experience? I know you guys have done lean training, worked to like on some of the process and all this, but how do we evaluate success when it comes to this?
Intergov's gonna be the big key in that. Prior to Intergov, it was manual and we had a spreadsheet that had every permit in it. So from a hot water, over the counter hot water heater to a 60,000 square foot school. Right? And so and they had the application date and the issuance date and the completion date in the same spreadsheet. I mean, how do you get an average, right? It wasn't possible. So now we can actually sort through Intergov and sort out single family residences and look at average time, average turnaround, average review time. We can pull out commercial projects, over the counter projects. And so we can get a more accurate bearing of where we're at with our development review timeframe and really understand. I think anecdotally, our turnaround time's fairly good from what for most projects, from what we're hearing across the board. Again, it depends on the quality of the submittal. It really does. That gets it out the door much faster than if we have a lot of back and forth, because as soon as we send it back, especially on a commercial project, to an engineer or an architect, right? That property owner is at the mercy of their timeline, right? And then it gets submitted back to us, and there might be some projects ahead of them. We try to get resubmittals back in, but again, we're not waiting on that one resubmittal. We're getting other projects off the counter, off the stack, and getting things out the door.
Yeah, I think a big help in that timeline is just making sure that when we take an application, it's complete. And if the application is not complete, we work with the applicant to make it complete before we bring it in the door.
We were talking a while back about over the counter permits. Have we implemented that yet? Like fencing and stuff, you just come in, sign and.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how's that working out?
Yeah.
Fairly well.
Sounds like
I'd
as
say.
long as they do what they said they're gonna do.
Yeah.
I meant
South
like
line.
fencing, like a water heater, you want to replace a water heater, you just come in.
They're
And
fast.
Yep,
Yeah.
residential roofing, you provide manufacturer specs. I think that's the biggest thing that we ask for. If you're replacing a window.
Mhm.
Bring in the manufacturer specs of that window or that hot water heater in with your application, attach it. You're gonna be done. You're gonna be out the door.
Don't use alternative means and methods, which is what Sean was talking about earlier, which requires the engineering. If you can do it prescriptively, we can get it done really quick.
More of just a comment, so I really appreciate you guys kind of walking us through this, because I'm not a developer or builder. So I think I pulled like one permit since I've lived in Shelton to replace my fence. So I don't really understand the process necessarily, or the challenges that, the development community might face. Definitely hear them from time to time, but I was sitting listening and, the comment, Sean, you're making like, I'm gonna be on vacation for a week. I'm letting the builder know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's just train somebody else to do Sean's job. Right? So he can take vacation and not have to coordinate it. And same thing, it's like, oh, well, train somebody else to do Mike's job and he wants to take a day off. But then I'm like, well, probably not, because you guys each have like an individual skill set that you've acquired over a career, right? And I kind of would rather you be the authority, knowing that we got to work within our 90-ish FTE count and all that stuff, and we have a finite budget. So I was just kind of going through that in my head and then kind of wondering, I know we've hacked through process, but are there any other things out there that we could support to help you guys do what you just dictated to us, which is get to yes and help people get their project on time and get completed? I mean, I know we supported Energov. I'm hopeful that that's going to help, but I mean, are there any other things out there that we could be doing to help the greater community do things better?
I mean,
This is your chance before Jeff gets in between.
for me, from a land use standpoint, this doesn't speak directly to building permits. It's for the land use process. I mean, I think the best thing any applicant can do, especially for larger projects, is talk to us early. I've had situations in my career, not even here, but before I even came to Shelton, where a developer might actually have like their commercial building design. And they come in, they bought the property, and there might be some nuance to the property that says, in a worst case scenario, that if you can't even do that there, and you should just see the look on their face, the bottom just dropped out of their economic world. And that is a terrible place to be from my side of the table. I would have preferred that person call me and just say, hey, Jason, I'm thinking about buying this property. Can I do this there?
Can I
Absolutely.
build a bowling alley there?
Yeah, and sit down with us. I go through concepts with people all the time. And a lot of times, if it looks feasible, what I recommend then is they go through the pre-submission conference process. Some people choose not to do that because they see it as a waste of time. It's like, well, it's going to take 3 weeks to schedule it. I got to give you all these concept plans and, then I go from there. I just want to get to work. I'm telling you, if you can iron out even a couple of things as it might relate to sewer connections, or, maybe you need sprinklers and you didn't know that. Well, that's a huge thing to know before you bite off that building. And we can tell you that a lot of times up front, if you give us enough detail in the pre-submission conference, if that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like, a lot of people I think they interpret it as like this extra layer of bureaucracy, but in my opinion, it's an infinite help, I think, to the applicant. We get a lot of people that leave that meeting going, oh my goodness, you gave us so much information at this meeting. This is incredible. We should have contacted you 6 months ago,
We just did a pre-sub. If the applicant, for whatever reason, licensed professional engineers, they, like Jay Harris, I used to put together plans and all this good stuff. They didn't ask us questions. And because they did not meet our sewer design standard, the whole project basically just fell apart. It was like a 20-lot subdivision, gotta have gravity sewer. So if they had simply asked a question, they probably had 100 man hours invested in the work effort. And so we're, I collaborate a lot with Jason, because we kind of ebb and flow with the things that we do. And plus Jason, he's lived in Shelton, he knows, about a wetland or this. He helped us redesign basically the Coffee Creek entrance road. Because he walks the property, he goes, well, why don't we go this way? And so we were able to take something that was 20%, the entrance road, brought it down to 12 through a collaborative process. We're here, we want to help people, but they have to ask us. And I think a lot of it is like Jason said, they would simply come in and pre-sub. We can't force them to do that, but that would get the word out. But anyway, I guarantee they won't make that mistake again.
Yeah, reach out to us before you spend a whole bunch of money on a project for that 20-lot subdivision. For the one that Mike's talking about with the entrance road at a 20% slope, that adds all kinds of costs onto the development because you have to add things for, fire response. Picture a snowstorm, or the road's iced over, a fire truck's not getting up that. No way. But it's things like that. Call us. We are here to answer questions.
Yeah, so the sort of where I was going here with the question too was something that was loosely brought up during our last strategic planning retreat with the EDC was potentially either acquiring like a consultant or somebody to help people navigate the process, right? So if you're a business and you're looking to move into Shelton and we've got available properties and you want to put your bowling alley in here, something that could be facilitated to say, okay, here's what change of use process looks like with the city or the county, right, or whatever. And so I was trying to kind of glean some ideas here and see, is that actually a good idea, or is it,
I think our staff provides that service now. They're the subject matter experts, right? I think bringing in a third party might complicate, might be more confusing than anything.
Getting a good contractor or something on the hook too.
Yeah. I think now having some support for these individuals that are working solo in their disciplines sounds like a great idea. And we may need that at some point. Easy for me to say, right? I'm not doing it. But and some days we do need it. Certainly, but we're working through those difficulties. We're working through vacations. We're working through all the daily issues that come up at this point. But we will, when we're talking about Coffee Creek and some of the other developments coming down the line, and it will impact workload before long.
I think the basic thing to remember is what these folks are doing is applying regulations. And who among us likes being told what to do? Right? So remember, they're applying regulations from the federal, from the state, and from our municipal code. And as long as they do it fairly and objectively, which they all do, I think support on that end would be extremely helpful. That doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes, and we need to have those mistakes pointed out so we can do better. We have to be able to improve. But at the base level, they're all applying regulations, which, not everybody likes or appreciates.
One other item that's come up in previous strategic planning sessions and some other discussions is stock plans. And while that obviously probably would not relate to most commercial projects, is having stock plans that meet your standards something that you think would expedite the process and encourage that development? Or because of the nuances of the properties, is that maybe something, is it worth looking into as far as what the investment level from the city would be to encourage additional households, et cetera, and expedite that process?
So we have a stock plan policy. Sean's dealt with this with contractors in the past. So you, as a developer or contractor, you can come in and stock a plan.
Right.
So you can submit once, that plan is stocked, and then it reduces your plan review fee by 50% for the next project. Having a plan that you can purchase off the shelf or build off the shelf from the city, there's a lot of nuances there. I know Lacey
City
has
of
an
Lacey.
ADU plan. I don't know how successful it is.
It's limited in square feet too.
It
So-
is, yeah.
Diff-
And then when the code changes, you're updating those potentially, and so the city has an investment at that point.
The other part, different parts of town have different soil types. Different parts of town have different wind loadings. Different parts of town have different snow loadings. So having, one set or even, there might be something to be said for having one set for each of the different categories, but then categorizing where those are around town. We can definitely take a look at that and let council know what it would cost. But it's not just, pick these 3 home types and you're approved no matter where you can go in town because of all those different environmental factors. Shelton's not huge, but it still has multiple different areas of, wind, snow, soil, all kinds of different stuff.
And there's the question of the financial investment on the city's part, the staff time, but also is it something the development community even needs? I don't know the answer to that, but it is something that we've discussed kind of on and off again. So it seems the appropriate occasion to bring it up once again.
And so you mentioned a consultant, hiring a specialized consultant. Okay, in our adopted fee schedule, we have a line item. It's called use of consultant for plan review and inspection. And we charge the actual cost. We basically bring in subject matter experts, like for example, Coffee Creek, they did transportation impact analysis. It's like that. We brought in somebody that does that work every day, all day. That's what they do. They reviewed it. They gave us their recommendations. We synthesized those into like 2 pages. And then we use basically these experts in their field. We brought in subject matter experts and figuring out, the water situation. So we're doing, what you have indicated, and we're actually using our adopted fee schedule, and we're billing the applicant. So it doesn't cost the city. We're not having to pay money out of our pocket. We just bill them at cost. We're not marking it up or anything. So that we're actually implementing kind of what you had indicated through the adopted fee schedule.
Our permit fees still aren't 100%.
No.
They're 80%.
Roughly.
So then the other 20% is absorbed through general fund, other general fund rather than. Yeah, question, I'm sorry.
I have just a comment. Two comments. I remember the wastewater treatment plant over there where the MTA is right now. And Mike, probably you remember that. Mike Olson, do you remember the wastewater treatment over there where the MTA is, the park and ride? Yeah, not too many people probably remember that, but anyway. And second, you asked what the city, what we as a council can do to help them.
Yeah, or anybody going through.
We can verbally talk to people when they come up to us and know that we're council members. And they're a little irritated because they're not clear on the permit. Just go, we can just say, go in and speak to the crew. And they'll answer anything you want to ask
And
with, hopefully,
yeah, I think the biggest message is we want to help you.
yeah,
We want to help you invest. That's simple.
so.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd say with the dozen or so people that I've talked to that were dissatisfied with the city, I'd say over half of them kind of were, it was their fault. They moved things mid-project and were upset that it didn't get allowed. What do you mean I can't build my house this way? I just shifted the way I built my house. So I definitely see that that's kind of hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And I'm on my third Intergov permit, and yeah, I really like it from my end. I don't see your end, so I don't know if it's awesome for you guys or not. But I get to see everything. I get to see when you looked at it. I get to see when you accepted it. It really, hey, that document's already in when I get asked for it again. And it's a good system though. I'm enjoying it.
It's actually the first feedback I have personally heard of. So that's good
And
to hear.
I've actually got 3 different ones going. I've got a commercial one, a right of way that I'm done with, and then a special use permit. So I'm kind of running the gamut. I haven't done a residential one yet. It's coming. So
Pretty soon you'll be the expert on that.
I'm trying.
Perfect. Quick question on the easement. We had talked in the past that we thought that 60 feet was too excessive. Are we still looking at that?
I definitely think 60 feet is way too large for residential streets. Not all, things like collectors, maybe minor collectors should be 60 foot wide. But residential streets, you don't need all that.
Are we gonna have that on a study session down the road or?
That's going to be a very long vacate and abandon process that is on our list to do, but has not bubbled to the top yet.
Perfect. All right, if there's nothing else, we should move this on to a discussion about a homeless outreach coordinator position. And Jeff Knighton is joined.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
gentlemen.
Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you,
guys.
guys.
Appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks,
0-0 final.
You guys aren't staying for the rest? What?
That's not up front.
Good night, y'all.
Max, thanks. Appreciate it.
So, members of council asked for, excuse me, mayor, deputy mayor, members of council, several weeks ago, members of council asked for a discussion about a homeless outreach coordinator position. And I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background on what that looks like. We had hired a council had funded a homeless outreach coordinator as part of the 2019 budget development. And we hired for that position, recruited for it in January and hired it in February of 2020. That person that took that position was on the job all of 3 weeks before COVID hit. And so there wasn't really an opportunity to do much of the work that was outlined in the job description, which I also attached to the memo for your reference. Because of COVID and because no one knew what the financial outlook would look like or how it would affect the city, we went through and we developed a 4-stage process for how we would address each stage once those trigger points were hit. So we had cuts at, I'm trying to remember accurately now, but cuts at a 5% dip, a 10% dip, a 20% dip, and the worst case scenario was a 35% dip in overall city revenues. We got to the second stage of that before some of the federal discussions about federal grants and the CARES Act and the ARPA dollars and things like that started to come into being. At that second stage, there were was a trigger to eliminate several positions. Most of those positions at the time were unfilled. So we just eliminated those from the funding structure. 2 of those positions were filled. And unfortunately, we had to lay off those 2 positions in August of 2020. One of those was the homeless outreach coordinator. So that's what happened at that point. We have a couple options as far as a homeless outreach coordinator is concerned moving forward. But I do want to point out that the 5-year financial forecast that we've talked about for the general fund specifically has shown that we'll be in a difficult position maybe sooner than we initially thought, which was 2024. But I'll be talking to you about that a little bit more as we move forward. But the first option is to fund the existing homeless outreach coordinator position that we have the job description for. Now that position has a salary range, it's grade 20, so it doesn't really matter what the title is. We do separate it by grades, similar job types, those types of things. Of a salary between roughly 56,000 to 75,000. And then you need to add an additional 30% on top of that for benefits. So midpoint for this position, midpoint with the salary and benefits would be $99,433.76. So that's with the full benefit package. I think based on the success of similar roles in other cities that we modeled this after to begin with, that it could be successful here, but I don't have any data to show that because again, we had 3 weeks of somebody brand new on the job before March 13th, 2020, when everything kind of turned down. How about that? Second alternative is to rethink how the homeless outreach coordinator role was initially designed. The first, what we did with that role, you've seen on the attached job description, but we might have that I've seen in also other cities that has worked for their purposes, is to think of that more in a mental health responder role. That mental health responder role would likely not be at a grade 20. You would want someone with state certification, someone that's trained to deal with mental health issues rather than a subset of homelessness, rather than the entire homelessness community. That would likely be more expensive. However, there was a grant opportunity that was adopted by the state legislature last year, and I listed the bill there in your memo. But there's an alternative crisis response team that is a grant opportunity funded through the Washington State Healthcare Authority. And I'll be attending a webinar on that grant program. It's brand new on the 21st, I believe. So I'll be looking to see how they're going to administer that and if it's something that we might be eligible to apply for. You see a lot of these grants that are only for specific counties. You know, they'll design the grant program for, you know, counties of 1 million or more people on the Puget Sound, you know, that kind of thing. So it's only really for one area, but I'll make sure that we're eligible for that. And if it's something that could work for us. Another potential opportunity is to partner with Mason County. They have a successful navigator program that I could approach the county with and see how we might work out a partnership. I would want to see that though, that we don't have a Shelton responder and a Mason County responder where they can't cross jurisdictional lines. It's for the community as a whole, and see what that might look like, what the costs might look like. You know, and what we might be able to get out of that partnership program. And the final option that I thought of as I was thinking about this is contracting with a private service provider to provide these outreach services, potentially to partner with a police department or partner with Mason County as an outside service provider and see what that model would look like. Any of these options, I'm happy to answer questions about or listen to the discussion and kind of see where we want to go from here.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. So we have so many programs here in the city, in the county for the exact same goals. Okay, so we have Crossroads, we have Crazy Love, we have Love Inc., we have public health. I mean, the list is very long. And I think what maybe the problem is that we're not communicating and we're not communicating our needs. So I very much know that some of the people who work at these places would be just so excited if we told them, this is exactly what we want to see. And I have a feeling that they would go for it because they want success in their positions too. They want the same things that we want. But we're not giving them that. We're just kind of letting them do their thing and they're running wild. If we narrowed it down and said, this is what we want, and had them come, sit and speak just like we have for many different programs, I think that we could get somewhere. I don't think we should have to extra fund it. They already have funding. They're already paid for. So why are we not tapping into that if that is our goal? Because the ultimate goal here, if you want to look at it across the board, their ultimate goal should be to end homelessness. Every single one of those programs, that needs to be their goal. They need to basically run themselves out of a job. There's other jobs out there, so that should be their goal. And if they're successful, that is what they'll do. We need to help them so we can help work together as a community. And that needs to be all of our goal.
I agree that the goal should be to end yourself when you're a nonprofit, because that's a problem that shouldn't be there. But the problem is getting bigger, and it's gonna get worse because the economy is gonna get worse. And we are gonna have the structural deficiency of our services are here, and the chart of how much homelessness is gonna go exponentially high. So I agree with you in one respect, but the problem is growing and not getting smaller. And we need to aggressively go after something that's more than what we're doing now. The second alternative looks really good, and I would like to have that funded under the with the emergency services, and that if things, we don't want to get cut again, I'd like to have it have, EMS levy if we have more homelessness, and change kind of what the police are already doing. But why don't we have a social service mental health person do it instead of a police person? That's my point of view, and I would like to aggressively go after 2 or anything, but not 0. And I think the services, we need to support them more, and we need to have more public funding for them or private funding for them as well. And the task is overwhelming and getting larger. And that's what I'll have to say for now. Thank you.
I mean, I would have to say that I agree with Sharon. That we have a lot of services right now, and I'm not sure duplicating them is going to be beneficial. The county puts a lot of effort into ending homelessness, and they're getting money for ending homelessness. There's the treatment sales tax money. There's all kinds of money and pots of money coming from commerce, and they disperse it as well as they can. That's why that one of the city councils on the board, and that's currently me, and James is my backup on that one. And we try to encourage them to use that money in our area as well, and they do. I mean, their navigator is here in town more than anywhere else already, which would be Jamie Horson at this point, and then some of the other staff in the health department. So I'd be afraid right now of duplicating services. I would like, to talk to the county about, what they would need, if there's anything that they would need from us, because they're already here in Shelton and they're already doing several things. And there's some other organizations that come in here in a truck or a bus and do services a couple times a month, and I forget who they are. Does BHR do that? We were in a
I
meeting.
think that's right.
And so they have services as well. So I would be a little nervous right now duplicating those services. That's how I feel at this point.
So when we went through this 4 years ago or whatever, one of the things what triggered creating the homeless outreach coordinator to begin with was inconsistent collaboration across the nonprofits that provide services. We weren't necessarily looking to provide services, but we were looking to take a leadership role on the problem and coordinate those organizations along with the county. My tune has kind of changed on that now after time has kind of moved on. We kind of are starting to see more of what is the chronic issue. We're not going to be able to just go and build homes for everybody and put them into houses and have all the supportive services, right? So like that's not something the city can handle. But the co-responder and the behavioral health, a lot of things that have been going on in the last, like, actually, as soon as today, actually, the things that have been opening up on behavioral health resources aspect, the co-responder roles, doing that consistently with what the county is doing, I think is the best bang for our buck. That way, there is a consistent approach to responding to this issue across Mason County and not just in the city or not just in the county. It's not lopsided. Yeah, because I won't disagree. There are resources in the community. I still believe there should be likely a heck of a lot more. I don't think it's necessarily a city's role to provide those, but to lean into the behavioral health side of the house, having the credentialed individual that can certify with law enforcement and involuntary commitment is very, very important right now. And having to call a DCR up in the middle of the night and wake them up and have them come out here and respond to get somebody off the street and into treatment. If we had those additional resources, especially dedicated to the city or the UGA or however we want to map it out, doing that consistently with the county, I think that's probably going to be the best investment that at least the public is going to see chunks of this problem are starting to get dealt with. Then we also have, the supportive services that need to kind of go along with that. But right now, that crisis responder role is stretched very, very thin. We are seeing a good response from that, even though it is minimally staffed. And again, funding a fully loaded FTE versus contributing at a cost to that program, managed by the county or the sheriff's office or whomever. I think that might be the right answer kind of moving forward. But like I said, that was kind of what I recall from the outreach coordinator role. But like I said, I think that's kind of changed over the last couple of years. So I'm leaning more towards behavioral health, mental health, but with the right credentialed individual that can actually do things. That's what I think we need, and we should be supportive.
Well, and to echo Joe's sentiment, I think that there's the consistency in how we are dealing with this across the county is really important. And being that we are the county seat, we tend to see a lot more of the problem visibly here just because of where we're located. We're the only city where the county seat, we're going to have that. One program I can think of that's been really successful is Bo Backen in North Mason, and Abe Gardner and their quick response team. And they have monthly opiate stakeholders because it's a consistent conversation with the players in the room who do what they do best and are addressing these specific areas. We are not experts on homelessness, and I don't think we need to be, but I think if there's opportunities for us to support grants for our nonprofits to do more, if we can leverage the dollars that we do have, I think it is our responsibility to assist in that way. I'm not in favor of funding a full-time city paid position, but any way that we can support in terms of even taking a portion of that towards certain programs or a specific effort rather than doing it for the sake of doing it. And I know that that's not anyone at this table's intent, but that's a significant amount of money. And it is not a problem that we can wave a magic wand over and hope it's going to get better. So being really strategic about how we partner and how we support the people who are doing this work, in my mind, is the best way to move this forward.
Well, I think
Hold on. So let's see if anybody else wants to talk before we start.
Did you have something, Kathy?
I don't have a comment right now. I want to find out a little bit more, but I'm not real comfortable about this funding amount for if we could go another route. That's a big chunk of money. I know that it's needed, but if we can put our feelers out there and figure out something out along the same line, but so at this point, that's where I stand.
And with the funding aspect of it, I think the cooperative effort decreases the weight that we'll carry on the financial side. There's a lot of potential avenues of funding, both with internal partners and external partners.
James?
Yeah, I'm adamantly against it. I think that a homeless outreach coordinator is a great feel-good position, but not at $100,000 a year to the city. I think that money could go to more jail beds every year. It could go to another officer that we could have downtown, possibly more than one. Just where that money could be put compared to that. I'm not into feel-good programs. I'm into programs that we can see results with and that are actually going to affect our community. I personally don't like any of them. I'd rather move us more towards a no lie, no sit, no panhandling than I would a homeless outreach coordinator. Okay. And we also, I mean, we've got some of our nonprofits that have went from under $1 million a year to over $10 million a year in funding. And they're still not denting it. So us throwing $100 grand a year away at this type of thing makes no sense to me.
Thank you. Miguel.
100 grand isn't a lot of money when you're dying on the streets. And just your own medical bills are going to be $100,000 if you didn't have insurance.
Okay.
Anyway, let me talk about the homelessness task force and how we're talking about. There is no housing in Mason County, 0. And if you can't afford it, you're overpaying. There is housing nowhere at Crossroads. You're on a wait list. You're on a wait list at Turning Point. You're on a wait list at wherever. You can't even get into Community Lifeline because you're not in the feds. And winter is coming. And people are going to die on the streets, and someone's going to pay for it eventually. Right? Whether it's the county, the city, or Mason General. And we're saving money by spending money right now. If we wanted to do that. And we at the homelessness task force have defined a lot of reasons why what we're doing is inadequate and in fact nothing. And yes, there is more money because there is more homelessness. And the homelessness problem, again, I'm going to stress this, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So we have to do something now to alleviate even the potential increase that's going to happen. So would you want to pay now or do you want to pay later? 10 times more. So I think we should be proactive and at least look at what other cities have done that have these programs that are embedded with the police force. And since most of the police action now is dealing with homelessness, why not put it in that realm in emergency services? Because it's an emergency.
Thank you, Sharon.
I'm just curious how this one person is going to keep those people you're saying are dying from dying.
Yeah.
We're not going to save everybody. We're going to save a few.
We have programs in place, but I'm not going to argue with you.
This side.
Yeah, just one more comment. I agree with Sharon. How one person can save. If there's no housing, there's no housing. This coordinators are gonna magically make housing appear. So we have to do something else. We have to really need to put our heads together and figure this way economically and whatever.
I'm actually not sure we actually have a homeless problem to begin with. I think we have a mental illness problem. And I think we need to lobby our state to do something about it. They're the ones who closed down the eastern and western state hospitals or released all the nonviolent offenders back into the counties where they came. And some of these people just don't belong on the street. They don't belong in jail. They belong in a facility where they're getting their medication. They're being taken care of. I think our state needs to step up and we need to use our lobbyists and other cities get involved in the AWC and tell our state we want them to help us with these problems. I mean, I think they caused a lot of it by releasing online nonviolent offenders that don't belong in the streets. We all know there's people on the streets that don't belong there, but they can't take care of themselves. Even if there was a house for them, they couldn't live in it. If it was free, they couldn't live in it. They can't take care of themselves. There's people every day banging their heads on the wall down in El Sharapes. You know, that person does not belong on the streets and doesn't belong in jail, but there's nowhere for him to go. There's 100 beds statewide available for mental illness. You know, this is a state problem and the state needs to step up and we need to use our power and AWC's power and other cities and make the state step up and take care of this problem because I think they are the ones who created this.
That was, council, remember that lobbying for mental health support, that was
Yes.
something that council adopted as part of our lobbying, our legislative program for next year. So that's definitely on the list.
The second alternative does mention that it's a mental health coordinator.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to build everyone a house. I'm trying to get someone some treatment that they're not getting because maybe they don't have the best job and have the best insurance to take care of these things through either public or private means. And if we can have somebody there catching them right before they get dead, then there's still a chance. But we're gonna have more deaths and blood on our hands. And you don't want to spend $100,000, and I'm just livid that that's the amount of money that you're willing to kill people about over.
I think
No,
that's
no, no.
way out of
We're not
line.
talking about money and
Yeah.
killing people. We're
You're-
talking about.
Piss at me, piss at me, bro.
Excuse me,
Hey.
a position that is not gonna really accomplish anything. There's still no beds available for these people. You know, there's, I mean, what is that person gonna do? They're not gonna invite them to their house. There's no place for these people. This is a state issue. The state needs to reopen and commit some of these people that don't belong on the streets and take care of them.
This is a human issue, not a state issue.
And if I may, I don't think that anyone at this table would say $100,000 is not worth someone's life. Everyone here recognizes that that is a significant amount of money and it's not nearly enough all at the same time. My perspective is that unless we are strategic in how we are spending those dollars to make sure that we are actually able to help people, that is my concern. And so I think looking at opportunities to work with people who do this day in and day out and find ways to leverage those dollars, whether they're our city tax dollars or state tax dollars or private individuals who are generously helping, I think that's our responsibility in helping to make sure that that helps as many people as possible in a way that actually moves the needle. And I'm not certain that the traditional role that we created a few years ago would meet that need. So that's my perspective on kind of what we ran through this evening. And I would hope that everyone sitting at this table doesn't want to see anyone be hurt. No one at this table is going to say that $100,000 is not enough money, and no one is going to say $100,000 isn't worth someone's life.
Just to summarize what I think I've heard is the direction that council would like me to go explore is a partnership with our existing nonprofits and with Mason County to see how we might be able to supplement the work that they're already doing and leverage the dollars that they've received from the federal government.
I agree with that.
And support them and grant opportunities.
Yes.
If I could add one more little anecdote related to the mental health aspect, last meeting, I kind of talked about the challenges with incarceration and being able to, put people in jail that have committed crimes. Again, from the mental health aspect, if somebody does commit a crime, and I don't care if they live on the street or not, if they do commit a crime and we have to take them to jail or we try to take them to jail, well, if there is any indication of a mental health issue, well, now we have an officer off the street that is essentially tending to this individual for, I know for a fact, the jail has said, take this person to Mason Health and get them cleared from a mental health perspective. And we had a sergeant sitting with this individual for like 4.5 hours, right? That's down an officer on shift. We have 3 on, 2 guys on. God help us if we have a situation where somebody needs help in the community and we're sitting here getting to my point with, if we had a non-cop having to do those types of roles or could actually just clear them on the street and say this person should be involuntary committed or voluntarily, whatever the issue is, or direct the next step in the process, I think we're going to be money ahead. And I think we're going to start to see things start to change. And then as things improve, I then believe, sort of the next phase of this is, then when we start seeing things improve, hopefully we start seeing improvements in the quality of life in the community. More folks want to move to the community. Revenue starts to come up on par with us to be able to address some of the other fundamental challenges, right? When it comes to housing or other supportive services and funding that. But I think at the baseline, we've got a chronic issue that we've got to kind of address, and it's mental health driven, I believe. And having a resource that is committed to the city, whether it's a coordinated effort amongst multiple organizations or not, But having that dedicated resource to be able to do those types of activities, I think is important in the city.
Do we have a place where people can be involuntarily? I mean, even if we do have that person, how much capacity do we have? That's the other part of this. Like, once again, it's,
All over the state at that point.
yeah,
It's like 100 beds available statewide.
statewide, there's 100 beds,
Statewide.
so.
And our facility down here from Telecare is full and not with our.
Gotcha.
And
That's
one of those other moments too, with having that individual that is capable of, and I don't really know all of the terminologies, why I'm kind of maybe a little more general with it, but having that individual who's credentialed to make that call. Can either say this person goes to jail tonight, or this person can't, right? Versus, again, taking a cop off the street for half their shift to try to figure that out. Only to find out that, yeah, they could have just gone to jail 5 hours ago. Or they needed higher level of care, right? So. It's a touchy subject, guys. I mean, we're all in it together on this. I mean, we've been hearing that freaking phrase for like 3 years now, but I mean, literally, like, just give us some ideas. Let's try to, let's try to do something.
I'm
I
under
can
the
tell you-
impression that it has to be a medical professional to involuntarily.
Yeah,
remove
there's
somebody.
several state licenses that are issued to people that are able to do that under that license. Whether they're also willing to is, they would have to want to go into this role. So you're talking about a narrow subset and then narrowing it down even further. But I do think we are by far not the only community in our state dealing with this, not even close. And I don't know what the legislative agenda for the Association of Washington Cities will be. I know this component is on our agenda. And I know that I've talked to other cities around the state that they have also are looking at this piece. So hopefully it's a policy piece that we can help our partners at the AWC push.
All right. Anything else for Jeff or?
I'm gonna stay with the later.
All right. Does council have any new items for discussion? All right, this meeting is adjourned at 8:01 PM.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
you know, I'm not sure if this is the place or not, but I would like to start talking more about no sit, no lies.
Okay.
Does the council want to entertain that conversation tonight? We have to extend the meeting though.
I don't think we have to talk about it tonight.
Oh,
I just.
Do it in
I'd
a
like to
study
get it on.
session,
okay.
future study session.
All right. Is there anything else? This meeting is adjourned at 8:02 PM.